Hello and welcome to the session on data visualization. My name is Brett Lonsdale and I'm going to be taking you through the session looking at three of our products and also getting a good look at business connectivity services as well out of the box with Microsoft SharePoint. So before we start, just a couple of introductions to the company and also to myself. And then we'll introduce the topics and get started. You'll find that nearly everything that we do today is going to be live demonstrations. So there's just a handful of slides, really is just pointers. And also to mention that the session is being recorded, so that will be made available later on. You'll be able to watch that via our site and also our YouTube channel. And there'll also be the option to ask questions as well. So you can do that in a couple of ways. You can raise your hand, which is something that you can do in the GoTo meeting. Don't physically raise your hand because I won't see that. So yeah, if you raise your hand using the GoTo webinar software, I'll be able to see that and I'll be able to unmute you and you'll be able to ask your question. Just make sure that your mic is set up before I unmute you though. Another way is to tweet. So our Twitter handle is @LightningTools. So feel free to follow us, and also if you want to post a question there, I'll be happy to answer it straight after the webinar as well, or perhaps one of my colleagues will be able to answer it for you too. So yeah, first of all, like I said, my name is Brett Lonsdale. I founded Lightning Tools 10 years ago, and one of the products that we're going to be looking at today, the BCS MetaMan, actually started off just over 10 years ago as BDC MetaMan back in the day, and it was the tool to help you connect to lots of different external data sources and make that data available in SharePoint. So that tool has evolved hugely over the years, and that's one of the products we're going to be having a look at and how we can use that to make some of your data that might reside on different platforms such as Oracle and SQL, maybe data in the cloud as well, like Dynamics CRM or Salesforce.com, and making that data available to SharePoint, and not simply by importing it, but actually by linking to it, so we get real-time updates to the data throughout SharePoint as well. Also, a couple of things we do in the community. One of them is the SharePoint Pod Show. You can go to sharepointpodshow.com and listen to some of the interviews that we've been doing over the past few years in relation to SharePoint. And also, if you are UK based, then we are also the founders of an event called the UK Community Day, which takes place around every 2 to 3 months, and we have a day where you can attend free of charge and get some hands-on using SharePoint. We've had some developer days, we've had some IT pro days, we've had some end user days, and the next one's going to be a Power BI day. So if you're interested in learning a little bit about Power BI and getting some hands-on with it, then check out ukcommunityday.com and you'll be able to register that event very shortly. Okay, so in the past, I've actually written a couple of books on this subject on business connectivity services, and formerly the Business Data Catalog. So one of them back in 2007, the Developer's Guide to the Business Data Catalog, and that was very much around building different web parts and things like that around the Business Data Catalog API. And again, in 2010, for SharePoint 2010, we wrote the Business Connectivity Services book, which takes you through a lot of the different things like external lists and how to configure search, some of the things that we're actually going to be looking at today. You might be wondering what happened to the SharePoint 2013 version or the SharePoint Online version. There have been a few BCS chapters in some of the books written by myself, for Microsoft Press and so on. However, my wife announced that she was expecting, and then again, so there's been 2 children on the way, which kind of eats into some of that book writing time that was in the evenings. So they haven't materialized just yet. I have been tempted to do a copy and paste from the 2010 book and just rename some things to 2013, but I think you might spot that. Okay, so what we're going to be taking a look at is basically our BCS suite, or the BCS bundle, and that includes, first of all, BCS MetaMan, which is a tool. It's a Windows application. You install it on the desktop of any user that wants to establish the connections, and you can point it at pretty much any database. We have about 30 different data sources supported, whether that's through ODBC or directly, or also through WCF services and OData and things like that. That there's multiple ways of connecting to different data sources. And we also have another product that we offer on behalf of another organization called Theobald, which helps you to connect to SAP as well. And that's very, very similar to the likes of BCS MetaMan in the fact that it creates the external content type for you, making the data available to SharePoint. So there's a couple of choices there for building external content types, and they work for SharePoint on premises, right the way up from 2007 to 2016, and also for SharePoint Online as well. So if you are using SharePoint Online and you want to make some data available to it, you could do that in a couple of ways. You could connect to a SQL Azure database, or you could also connect to an OData source or WCF service and make that data available. You may have looked at the possibility of using Visual Studio to create what's known as the external content type app, where it basically builds an external list for you to a site. But one thing to bear in mind with that is that app just gives you the external list, and there's so much more to business connectivity services, which we're going to be taking a look at today. Okay, so we'll take a look at BCS MetaMan and how it can be used to create the connection, generate a model file, and deploy that to SharePoint. And then we're going to take a look at a couple of other products as well. One of them is known as the Lightning Data Viewer. Again, it's available for SharePoint Online and SharePoint On Premises. For SharePoint On-Prem, you can, again, connect to multiple different data sources, not just business connectivity services. So you can use it to connect to Oracle directly or SQL directly, or you can also connect to an external content type. And that obviously opens it up to a whole realm of different external data sources that you could connect to. What it provides you over and above what you get with SharePoint is if you take something like the external list in SharePoint, it's a fantastic list. You can create items, you can edit items, you can delete items, as long as you've got those methods there inside your external content type that we'll be taking a look at. But where it lacks is in styling. And this is mainly due to SharePoint Designer losing its design tab back when SharePoint Designer 2013 was launched. So that's very well and good if you're a developer and you want to do some styling using XSLT. But if you're an end user and you just simply want to highlight some data using some conditional formatting, maybe you want to display some KPI images or something like that in your code, or create a little calculation, add some grouping levels and so on, you're not going to be able to do that by simply creating some XSLT. You'd have to go to a developer to get that done for you. So that's where the Lightning Data Viewer comes in. You can simply add the Lightning Data Viewer onto any page, connect it to an existing data source using BCS, or also connect it to a new data source, and that can include SharePoint lists as well. And you can do all of the formatting and make that data look a lot better. And it's not just about color formatting and so on either. You'll find that through business connectivity services, some of the data formatting isn't quite how you would want it. Date times, for example, get presented as long date times, and currencies get displayed with 4 decimal places by default and things like that. So there's some little things that you might want to fix, which you could again do very easily back in SharePoint Designer in 2010 and prior to that, but in 2013 became a little bit of a pain to do. So that's the sort of area where the Data Viewer can help. Again, you don't need any developer skills. You can just get on and use the Data Viewer within a team site. Next to that is the chart web part. So the chart web part is a web part you can again drop onto any page. You don't need any BI reporting skills or anything like that. It's very easy to configure. There's a wizard that drives you all the way through building your chart. There's lots of different types of charts that you can connect to. We can display 2D and 3D charts. You can have stacked charts. You can have multi-source charts and so on. And each of these can also drill down as well. So you can or the users can interact with the chart, and they can drill down into more detailed charts by interacting with the chart itself. And the chart can also connect to business connectivity services, or again, you could connect it to a SharePoint list. You can connect it to other data sources like SQL and Oracle and so on, including Excel. And also you can connect it to almost all of our products. So whether it's business connectivity services through MetaMan or our roll-up tool, the Lightning Conductor, you can actually connect it directly to the data viewer, so they're both reflecting the same data source. And you could also do some reporting on our Social Squared tool and things like that as well. So really powerful little web part that you can add into your SharePoint environment. Okay, so let's just talk about business connectivity services out of the box for a brief moment, and then we're going to see all of this. So this is the majority of my slides are going to be around what business connectivity services provides you, and that will make more sense to you once we then open up BCS MetaMan and start building our connector. So the external list is an offering ever since SharePoint 2010 was launched, and the external list is a way to present data from an external data source, external to SharePoint, and have it appear as though it is a typical SharePoint list. So if your end users are familiar with things like task lists and contact lists and things like that, they're used to creating items, edit items, and creating views and so on, then they'll be able to also work with the external list as well. So the only difference is the data doesn't actually reside in SharePoint. The data is external to SharePoint and it is linked to. Now that's actually quite a very good point, that the data isn't imported. There are some third-party products that import data into a list in SharePoint. Now we were just speaking to a customer the other day that had 8 million rows inside their SAP database. So you can imagine pulling in 8 million rows of data into SharePoint. First of all, that's not going to fly in a list anyway. But if it was able to, then imagine the impact that that's going to have on your content database, because any data that you import into SharePoint lives inside the content database. And not only are you duplicating that information, but your content database, you need to be aware of the limits of that as well inside each of your site collections. So linking to the data is a much better way to go. It also means that you're not going to get record locking issues and things like that. So if somebody edits an item inside an external list, that item is going to be edited directly in the actual underlying data source. So these are some of the benefits of it. Now, how the external list works, you can make these read-only if you like. You can have it just simply a list of information that people can open up and they can view it. But you'll notice on the drop-down of an item that you've also got the view, edit, and delete item, and right at the very top there is also new item. So you can make these methods available by building the method inside your external content type. So we can take a table of information or a view, or maybe even a stored procedure from a data source and build these methods on it. So if we want to make it read-only, then we just create what's known as the finder method or the read list method. And that read list method should typically return every single column and every single row from that table, view, or stored procedure. You can also build filters on each of the read list or finder methods as well. And every filter that you do will be reflected inside or throughout SharePoint where you're using BCS, and users will be able to filter on that information. So you can provide different types of filters, wildcard filters and limit filters and things like that. You can also create more than one read list method or more than one finder method. And the benefit of that is each of those finder methods that you create becomes another view inside the external list automatically. So we're not relying on users to build those views. You can build those views for your users. So whenever they go and establish or instantiate an external list, they're going to automatically have a number of views already created and deployed for them. So for example, if we had customers, you could have a APAC customer view, you could have a Americas customer view, and so on. Or if it was products, you could have products out of stock view, products getting low on stock view, and so on and so forth, just by creating multiple finder methods with a method or a filter on each. So we've also got some web parts. Now these are read-only, and these web parts, the nice thing about them is you can connect them to each other. So imagine inside your underlying database, you've got a normalized database with one-to-many joins. What we could do is recreate that join inside the model, the BDC model, that allows you to reflect that join inside SharePoint. So there is a number of different web parts available. One of them is called the BDC list web part, and we also have the BDC related list web part. And the related list would show the many side of a join. The list web part would show the one side of a join. And using web part connections, you can then build the connection between the two. So when you perhaps select a category of products, let's say we clicked onto bicycle tires, then we would have all the bicycle tires that we have in stock available inside the related list web part. Or if we click onto customers, we could see the orders that those customers had made, and so on. So these web parts are really, really powerful. What you can also do is build what's known as a custom action on them. You'll notice the actions menu on the screenshot there, and that actions menu can do anything. You basically point it at a URL. So if you wanted to Google a customer or look up a contact name in LinkedIn or something like that, then you can build the action is basically the URL, and then which column you want to pass through to that URL. And that means your users can just simply click these one-time buttons for Google searches, LinkedIn searches, or whatever you want to do. So there's also something called the external data column. This is something that you can create in any SharePoint list or library. And once you establish that column, it provides a lookup to that external data source. So let's say, for example, you're creating some documents inside a document library. Maybe they're sales quotations. Some of the information that you might want to present inside the document library is things like the customer name and the customer address for the person that you provided the quotation to. And that would allow you to find that information more easily in the future. So through search is one way. So if you searched on that customer name, it's going to return those documents because that becomes the metadata for that document. And also you could build views inside the document library itself. So you could very easily find customers in different regions again and so on, and look at the quotations that way from the document library. Now that also gives you a great interaction inside the rest of Microsoft Office, not just SharePoint. So if you've created some external data columns inside a library, and you go into maybe Word or Excel or whatever, first of all, the document information panel would allow you to set the value as well for that column type and look up the data even though you're in Office. And you also got things like the quick parts in Word where you could actually make these fields part of the Word document itself. So in the address field on the Word document, you could provide lookup from real life data. And again, it hooks into things like Outlook and InfoPath and things like that too. So there's some of the Office integration there. So this is an example of a Word document where you could look up, present a list of data, look it up, and it would populate all the other fields from that external column. And the last thing I'm going to mention here is search. So lots of people like search. We can go to the search site inside SharePoint and we can search on a value. Now, typically that is going to return documents and list items and things like that, or people. But if we've crawled your external content types, then we can also get it to search your external data as well. So if you imagine somebody might not be a user of the SAP system that you have, or they don't use Oracle, or they don't use Dynamics CRM or whatever, but from time to time they just want to look up some customer information, then they could go to the SharePoint search, do a search on the customer name, and bingo, there's the results. They can click onto that item and they can see all the information that they want without even going into the other application. Okay, in fact, sorry, there was one last thing, which is the user profiles. So that's just one extra thing that BCS allows you to do. And if you had user profile information stored inside some sort of database, PeopleSoft or something like that, you can pull that information in as a secondary data source for your SharePoint user profiles. And that just makes things like audience targeting and people searches and so on in SharePoint a lot more powerful. So with that explanation, let's go through and build an external content type, and we'll deploy it to SharePoint, and we'll start building some of these things that we've just been referring to. So here on my page, I have BCS MetaMan. So like I say, it's a Windows application, and all we've done so far is just open it up, and you'll notice down on the left-hand side here we've got some different data sources that you can connect to, the most common ones. If we go to ODBC as an example, you'll see there's actually a lot more than what's shown on the initial screen. So we have some like Infomix and Progress and Sage, SQL Anywhere, things like that, all of which you can connect to via ODBC. And in fact, you can pretty much, you're not limited to just that list. If you go onto connectionstrings.com or something like that, you'll find even more connection strings. And as long as you've got the ODBC driver installed, then you'll be able to connect to that data source using MetaMan. You'll find that we can connect to Oracle. So there's simply the Oracle server name, username, and password that we want to connect to. We can go to salesforce.com. That requires a bit more information. So we can provide a username and password to connect to salesforce.com. But we can also pass through the consumer key and the consumer secret, which is we have a blog post on obtaining that information from salesforce.com, so you can connect to that environment as well. There's also WCF services, so you can connect to a WCF service or maybe an OData service, and also Dynamics Online and so on. So there's lots of different data sources that you can connect to, and this is the only screen that really changes based on the connection that you're providing. So if we connected to Oracle versus SQL, you'll find once we're past this next step, the rest of MetaMan looks the same. So let's connect to SQL, and what we're going to do is, first of all, the server name is just there from last time I used MetaMan, but basically you can put in the server name there that you want to connect to, and then we can choose how we want to authenticate. Now there's two things here. We've got the authentication mode for you that is using MetaMan to authenticate. So you need to authenticate as the person that is going to build the model, and then the person who is going to be using the data once it's inside SharePoint also has to authenticate with the data source as well. So couple of things here. What you can do is you can provide a username and password, but once this is deployed, every user will go and access that database with the same username and password. That's all very well and good, except for one thing you won't be able to really tell is from an auditing perspective who's been accessing the data or who made changes to that data. There's also Windows authentication that you can use. I'd recommend using Windows authentication if you're in a Kerberos environment, not a NTLM environment. The reason for that is you will experience the double hop issue if you use Windows authentication in an NTLM environment. So the double hop issue is basically when your SQL server is remote to the SharePoint server. You're authenticating the user using their token from the browser through to the server, and that's one hop. The second hop to authenticate you from the SharePoint server or IIS server to the SQL server is not therefore allowed. So you'll see an anonymous error. So what you can do and what's recommended is to use Secure Store. So you can click onto Secure Store here, and you'll create a Secure Store application, which you can do through central administration. That can be done for you. And the idea of that is you can group a number of different users together to a single account. So you could take, for example, all of your salespeople, map them through to a single account, take all your warehouse staff, map them through to a single account, and they will be authenticated that way. That overcomes any double hop issue and also allows you to track who's accessing your database. So for this demo, I'm not going to use Secure Store. I'm just going to get away with using Windows authentication. We can select the database that we want to connect to. So there is a database picker there. We can go through and select it, and then hit the arrow there, and that will go through and present to us our model diagram. Now, on this model diagram, basically what we're going to do is build our tables, views, or stored procedures that we want to connect to. And you'll find that these lazy load, so as I click onto tables, tables gets populated, as does views and stored procedures. So now I'm looking at all of the different objects inside this particular database. Now, recommended is to build a view. So build a view on the data that you want to present in SharePoint or using one of the existing views. The reason I say that is basically performance and getting the right information back into SharePoint. What I'm going to do is use tables. I'm going to go and grab the customers table first of all and just simply drop it onto the design surface here. Okay, now that will, let's just resize the screen a little bit so you can see everything. So that will allow me to build these methods that we spoke about. So the first method here is the finder method. It's obviously required. BCS is pretty useless without it. So the finder method is going to return all of the rows, all of the columns. And it's used nearly everywhere within business connectivity services. The next one down is a specific finder method, and that's used when you're building joins. So if you click on a single customer, let's say, it obtains that customer ID from that customer that you clicked on and passes it through to the related list web part. That's one area. If we click edit item inside an external list to read item inside the external list, it uses the specific finder to open up that item. So there's lots of different places where that's used. It's also used in search when you select the item and so on. So those top two are required. The third one down is the ID enumerator. Now this is actually just a good practice thing. If we select the ID enumerator, it returns just a single column. It returns the primary key of the table that we're connecting to. And it uses that primary key for the search indexing. So if you are going to use search, we recommend you use the ID enumerator. We've then got the other three that kind of speak for themselves. If you want to be able to create new items, create new customers, click that one. If we want to be able to update customers as well, click the updater method. And if we want to be able to delete customers, click the deleter method. So they're optional. If you don't want people to be able to delete items through SharePoint, you'd rather they go to the actual external system, don't create a deleter method, and so on. It's fairly straightforward. Now on the left-hand side, we've got the identifier, and that's already selected for me. We've got the customer ID selected. The customer ID, in this case, is the primary key, and BCS MetaMan detected that for me. Sometimes you might have a number of different primary keys or whatever, or composite key. So in that case, you can go through and select which one contains a unique value. Now that's very important for BCS to work. Remember, the specific finder is required, and the specific finder to work properly has to have a single column inside that table view or store procedure that is unique. That's the only requirement there. So once we've selected those methods, we can hit create, and that generates the external content type on the page for me. And we can go through and we can preview the data. So it returns the first row, the first 10 rows of that data source. So we can see that we are bringing back the right information. Now I'm going to also go and drag a couple of other tables, or at least one other table. We'll grab the orders table and we'll drop that onto the page here. And I'm going to do exactly the same for that. So we'll select the methods and hit create. Okay, so we have both of our tables on here, and I want to be able to show the related data. So basically what I'm going to do is simply drag and drop a join between the two. And that allows me to specify the primary key, in this case customer ID from the customers table, and map it to the foreign key, the customer ID in the orders table. And we'll hit create. Okay, so that's our join established. The next thing we're going to do is just go through and explore some other things like custom actions and filters and that sort of thing. So I'm going to right click onto the customer's entity and choose configure entity. And basically in here is everything that I've already set up. We've got the identifier, the name of the external content type and so on, the version number, etc. And we've also got the title column. Now the title column is something that you can set using the SharePoint user interface itself, or you can set it here. This just saves a bit of time in the UI. So I set that to company name, and that way company name becomes my column that links to open up the item. And then we've also got the office item type as well. So this works with Outlook. It's purely there for Microsoft Outlook. So if you bring the data from an external list into Microsoft Outlook, you can control whether it comes through as appointments, whether it comes through as contacts, posts, or tasks, and you get to map the columns as well to the Outlook column set. Next, we're going to go to the Methods tab, And these are the methods that we already selected. I'm going to select the finder method to show you a couple of things. One of them is, here's our fields, and there is something called the picker in SharePoint that allows you to select an item to store it in a list or library, and we can choose which of these columns we want to show in that picker. So I'm going to add the company name here, and we'll also add maybe the city as well. So we'll add those two to the picker. Okay, filters can also be added, so we can add a filter to this. This one, all I'm going to do actually is set what's known as a limit filter, and we'll set that on the customer ID, and I'll set it to 1000. Now the reason why we're setting that is due to the external list in SharePoint having a limit per view of 5,000 items. So we just get a little warning if you don't actually go through and set a limit filter. It does work, it will go up to 5,000 items per view. And that is a very good reason why we want to go and create multiple methods, because remember that gives us multiple views. So I can actually go through and set another one. We can have another finder method. So I could call this one German customers and save it. So we now have that method as well, and I could go through and add a filter on that one. So we'll just name the filter, and we'll set the column to be country, and we'll say equals Germany. Okay, and again I can save that. Okay, so once we've done those, we can basically click update. So that will update the external content type, and in fact, just to point out, we can also go through and add those actions as well. So I'm just going to go add a quick Google action to this. So we can do a Google search, and we'll select the company name as the column that we want to search on, not the customer ID. That'd be a little bit boring. So notice here how the company name is basically going to be appended to the google.com/search URL. Okay, so we'll basically go through and save that. Okay, so these are the things that we can do to get our data ready for business connectivity services. Now, I will see a warning on my German customers method and also on the orders method because I didn't create a limit filter. We'll just ignore that for now. We don't have more than 5,000 rows anyway. So all I need to do actually is hit generate or deploy. Generate is going to build the model file that's specified here under settings. So it will generate the XML. So that's useful if you want to take that XML from a development environment and put it into a production. Or we can just hit deploy, and that will deploy to the URL specified at the bottom here. So that can be any URL inside your SharePoint file. So let's hit deploy. So this is deploying to SharePoint, and whilst it's doing that, we were going to go into the View External Content Types page in Central Administration. And what we should see is we get a new table called Customers and one called Orders in here once it's been deployed. Okay, so I think that should have happened. Let's just check MetaMan. Yep, so it's said it's done. It's got 2 warnings, which we expected. And in here, here's our data visualization webinar, orders, and we've got our data visualization customers. There we go. So we can go through and we can create all sorts of things on there. We can go and set some permissions. We can create profile pages. Those profile pages work with the search and so on. But let's speed things up a little bit, and we'll go through and start accessing that data. So here in a team site, what we're going to do is start off and let's create an external list. So we can go through and add an app. And in here, I'm going to select the external list app, and we'll call it customers, and we will look up the external content name, sorry, the external content type name, of which right at the very top is our data visualization webinar customers. So we'll select that and choose create. Okay, so that's been created. We can go into it, and there's our data. So we've got the data presented. There's our get all customers, and I've also got my German customers as well. So there's our multiple views already created. We didn't have to do anything for that. I can go through and create new items if I want to. So there's the form already built for me to create new items. And we can also go through and edit an item. So if I click onto edit item here, we can simply go through and set whatever value we want in here. So I'm just going to put the word south under Marseille, and let's hit save. And that will have been written to the underlying data source. Okay, already. In a document library, the external data column, another thing that we mentioned. So if we go into the library ribbon here, we can go through and create a new column. We'll make it an external data column. We'll call it customer, and we'll select the external content type that we want to work with. So I'll choose customer in that case. We can go through and select the company name as being the value we want to store, but I also want to display some of these other fields as well, including facts, because faxes I'm sure are going to make a comeback one day. Okay, so once we've done that, we can grab some data. We've got some generic documents that we can just simply drag into here. If we drag them into the right place, that is. There we go. Okay, so that will upload my documents for me, or some of them, and we can go through and we can edit the properties. So in here we've now got the lookup, and notice, remember the show in picker property that I set was just on the company name column and the city column. So we can go through and select which of those we want to store as metadata against that document. And it's not just gone and got the customer name, but it's also gone and got the address, the city, the country, etc., etc. And that information becomes available not just for documents that you upload that way, but also if you created new documents as well. The document information panel, like I said, would be populated. We can provide lookups from within Word to that external data source, and so on. So just very quickly, if I go to the insert ribbon here, and we can navigate to the quick parts, and in the document property I could drop onto there the customer, and beneath that we could have the city or address. I'll add some text, and sure enough in here we can actually provide a lookup. Sometimes we get a timeout the first time we do it. That's just because I'm running on the server, so don't be surprised if this fails the first time. But hopefully this will be populated with data, and we can select it in the same way that we did inside SharePoint to set the contents. There we go. So we've got customer ID, company name, and city. So I can select one of those, and notice how it also populated the address there, and it's also populated the document information panel at the very top. So we could write that information back. We could save that document to the document library, and that metadata would be set already on that document. Okay, so perhaps a lot to take in so far, but that hopefully shows you a little bit about what you can do. The last thing we're going to do with BCS out of the box here is just go through and build a connection that takes advantage of our association that we created. So let's go ahead and just delete some of these other web parts, and then we'll take a look at the data viewer in the chart. So in this left-hand web part zone, I'm going to go and add from the business data section, we're going to add a business data list, and on the right we're going to add a business data related list web part. So we'll drop those two on the page, and I'm just going to hit save to save that page. That's important because there is a little bug in SharePoint. That is when you click on open the tool pane here and you go through and set the external content type that you want to work with, you then get back onto the page and nothing's there. And you have to go and start again at the web parts. So there's the view again. So notice once more, the German customer's view is available to me because it's automatically displaying that finder method that I created. So I could show that one. And there's our XSL editor. So in there you can do some styling. And if we just hit apply, that's going to go and grab all of that data for me. And once more, it's displaying it. It's not importing it. So that data is displayed there. Now on the right hand side here, I'm going to open up the tool pane in the related list web part, and we'll show the orders external content type. Okay, and again we'll go through and apply that. So it's gone and got the columns, but it's asked me to create the join. So we can basically go through and join those two web parts together. So as we save and close now, you will notice that as we go through and select a customer, that we also see on the right hand side there the orders related to that customer as well. Okay, so we've got that join, and we could daisy chain that again if we wanted to maybe show the order details or show the product information and so on. So this leads on a little bit to the data viewer, because what about styling? Well, one of the things we can do is go through and edit the page here. We can choose edit web part, and that makes the edit view option available. So as far as styling goes, not quite styling, but you can go through and do things like select which columns you want to display and things like that. So in here you can choose the columns that you want to show on the page and change them. But if you actually want to do some styling as far as data formatting is concerned, or if you want to do some data formatting like fixing those long dates and things like that, you have to go to the edit web part and click on the XSL editor, which is just ugly. It's like finding a needle in a haystack to figure out what it is you want to be able to achieve. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is go through and create a new page. So let's add a new page here, and we'll call it dashboard. Okay, and I'm going to choose a different layout. So let's just go with 2 columns, and we're going to add 2 of our web parts. So one of those web parts is going to be the data viewer. So we'll drop that onto the page here. And the other web part is going to be the chart web part. So in here is the SharePoint chart web part, which we'll add. Okay, so the first step is to hit the drop down on the data viewer, and we're going to go through and configure that web part. So this web part here can connect to multiple different data sources. As I mentioned, you can connect it to SQL or Oracle directly. You can also connect it to BCS, as we've already mentioned, and so on. So if we were to connect to, let's say, SQL directly, then you'll notice the data source tab changes for each one. So this is asking me for the server name, how we want to authenticate, what the database name is, and so on. If we go to the SharePoint list data source provider, then we get a picker. So we can go through and select from a tree view what list we want to style, and so on. So you can drill right the way down to some lists there. And if we choose the external data source provider, we get to specify the external content type. So in here is the drop down, and I can go through and select the customers one that we just worked with a moment ago. So I can select that and map those methods. So we can map the find method, the add new method, the update method, delete method, and so on. And we can allow some dynamic filtering on there and so on. And then we can click onto the columns tab. So it's from here that we can actually start doing some styling. I can select all the columns that we want to show, drop these columns into the order that I want them to appear. So just simply drag and drop those into the to the relevant order. And from there we can also change the sort criteria. So notice here, if we sort by more than one, we can actually set the primary and the secondary sort. So that's obviously useful for things like the region and the country and things like that. You can add calculated columns. So if there's a column that we don't have, you could do maybe a concatenation or a calculation based on that. So maybe you want to add tax or something to a unit price column or something to that effect. You can build your calculation in there. And there's also advanced filtering. So we've got filters and advanced filters that you can go and set. So in here you can make them an and or an or, and set different filters to go across your columns there. Now from the display tab, this is where we can do the styling. So what I want to do, for example, under country here, you can do all of your different data formatting and so on. If we select the formatting option under country, let's apply this to the entire row, and we can set a different background color. So let's do that, and we'll say country is equal to Germany in there, and we could add another one as well. So we'll add some more formatting, and we choose a different background color. Let's just minimize that. So we can choose a slightly different color for another country and so on. And we can set that as an and or an or. So we'll hit save, and we've got our conditional formatting applied. You can also do things like set the number of items per page that you want to show, which column you want to link on to open up the item. Do you want to be able to insert, update and delete items? All of that sort of thing can also be set. Once you're happy, you hit save, and there we are. We've got some data with some styling. One thing I didn't do was select the entire row when we did the conditional formatting on France, so we could go through and fix that. But also notice here that we can filter as well. Oops, sorry, I didn't hit the plus on that. Let's just go through and set that again. Okay, and there we are. We've got our filtered values and whatnot. Okay, so end users can filter as well as being able to filter with inside the web part, which is another advantage that you have. So with that in mind, we're going to go through and build a chart. So let's go through and edit the chart. Okay, now the chart can be created on, again, all the same data sources. So ODBC or SQL, SharePoint lists, etc. And one of them again is basically data connectivity, business connectivity. So we can connect to that. We can choose the external content type once more. So in here we'll go down and if I can see it, the data visualization. There we go. So choose my my external system, and then I get to choose the entity. So I can choose customers or orders. So I'm going to select orders. So we'll view the data coming from orders. So there it is. And we'll choose next. Now for my orders, I want to show the order ID and I want to show the order date. And we can hit apply, and that's not going to make any sense yet for a chart. So we'll just hit next again. But you can see here we've got some information about the orders and the order dates. The next tab, we can go through and group the data. So I'm going to group in this example by order date, and I'm going to group by quarter. Okay, so for each data type, we're going to offer some different type of grouping that you can perform. Now, if I'm grouping by quarter, I obviously have to do something with the order ID, and in that case, I'm going to do a count, and that will give me the number of orders per quarter. So if we hit apply now, we now have a chart displayed on the page. And we can go through and refine the chart type. So I could choose a 3D chart, I could choose a pie chart. If I wanted to, there's a number of different things that we can display in there. These are all single series charts, but we could go and do some combination charts and things like that, where you could have each data series showing as maybe a line or an area chart and a column chart and so on. So there's a choice for each of those. So we'll apply the 3D column, hit next, and we'll set some captions. So we'll have the number of orders per quarter. and go ahead and apply that. And there's a number of different things that you can do in here as far as styling is concerned. You can change all the different colors if you don't like them. You can change some of the cosmetics. So if you don't like the gray gradient background, then first of all, you're on my team. But yeah, we can go through and deselect that. So if we just preview it without, that gives us a white background, looks a bit more modern. And we can do all the number formatting and things like that. So we're then going to jump down to the drill down section, and this is where we can do a number of different things as well. We can click the chart and actually land on a different page. So it's possible to actually click the chart and land on a page that shows the data viewer, for example, with the orders in that month, or the external list with the orders in that month that you clicked on. The way it would do that is by passing through a query string into the URL. So you can build your query string here to another page that contains the data, and then using the query string filter web part that comes with SharePoint, you can consume that query string value and map it to the external list or to the data viewer. So as you click the chart, you're going to see the data related to the bar or the column that you clicked onto. In this example, what I'm going to do is just break this down into month. So we'll do that, and we'll change the title, so we say month in there instead of quarter, and we'll go down another level as well, where we go down to day, and we'll customize that title to say by day. Then we've got the dynamic filters that we can also set. So if we select the dynamic filter, I can allow the users to filter the chart. So what I might want them to do is to be able to filter on country. So we'll apply that. Okay, and then we'll hit finish, and we've got ourselves a chart. Now, because of the page layout, it's fairly small. So what I'm going to do here is just go through and reconfigure the data viewer. Let's get rid of some of those columns. We don't need phone and fax. We've got messenger and chat and Pokemon and things like that we can do. Oops. Okay. So I think that's because I was filtering on a value there. But there we go. We've got a chart here that's displayed on the page. We can see Q1 of 1998 back then was quite a good quarter. So as I click onto that, we can break down into that quarter and see the number of orders per month. And if we click onto the month, we can see the number of orders per day, and so on. And we've got the breadcrumb trail, so we can navigate back again and interact with that. And then the filter value. Remember, we made it possible to filter on country, so that's the one value that shows here, and I can say that is equal to UK. So how many orders were there per quarter in the UK? We could go through and apply that and have a look at it, and so on. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea as to how we could go through, build some dashboards. You could have multiple charts like this along with the data viewer or the out of the box web part as well, and basically get some dashboards built without any coding whatsoever with your external data. So at that point, we've talked about the data viewer web part, we've talked about the chart web part. I'm going to open up for some questions. If you're interested in the products, there's lots of demos and tutorials available on our website, so just go to lightningtools.com and you'll be able to watch some tutorials there. Feel free to follow us on Facebook or Twitter and what have you, because we do announce new products and new things and blog posts that help you with SharePoint in general, things like that on there as well. But also, if you have any questions, you can email them to me, brett@lightningtools.com, or tweet them, or like I said, you could also raise your hand as well now. So if you want to raise your hand in the GoToWebinar software, I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. I'm not seeing any hands raised just yet. Okay, well, on that note, I'll just assume that I was very thorough. or you were just hanging out and doing something else. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Like I say, if you do have questions, feel free to fire them on an email to me, brett@lightningtools.com. And you will get a link to this video tomorrow, so you can watch that back if you want to, or share it with other people as well. So thanks very much for joining the webinar this afternoon.